What is up, people? My name is James Blissett, professional gambler, founder of Lucrative MMA, which is my handicapping service where I help people make money from betting on MMA. But today, maybe I'm going to help you make some money, but we're going to be doing a little recap of UFC London, the last card. Going to tell you how I made money, how I lost some bets, how I won some bets. It was a profitable event for me overall. It was a very profitable weekend because I had also won some money on Cage Warriors. So we'll be going over some of my bets, some of my guest bets, and some of the best bets of the night. And then we'll also be looking forward to UFC 291, Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje, which is the upcoming pay-per-view event this weekend. And we'll be getting into business about how we can make money on that card. I haven't done tape for every single fight on the card, so I'm not going to be speaking about the entire fight card, but I will be speaking about some fights, and we'll see if there's any potential value on the betting lines already. Even though props are not out market-wide, we still have money lines available, so I'm sure we will be able to cook up some profits even early. And as I said on my Twitter, I've got a special guest, man. I got my man. We already know who this guy is, right? I just spoke to him and I said his name is Liam Picks Fights. Not Liam's Fight Picks, because he actually picks fights in the gym, choking motherfuckers out. And also, he gives a lot of content every single week to help you make some money. And hopefully that's what he's going to do this time out. So, Liam, what is up, my man?
Absolutely, James. Pleasure to be here, brother. Far too kind with the introduction, but excited to talk some fights. Wasn't my weekend at UFC London, so excited to talk about some of the lessons that I've learned as well. Hit a couple bets, but really it just wasn't my night in terms of reads overall, a little bit sloppier than I like. So excited to get back to work, and 15 fights was a lot to take in last week. We have a much more manageable card here, a lot more higher level action, a lot more proven fighters. So I'm really excited about the card quality coming up.
Yeah, man, I can't wait for it. And one thing I'll say is that this game that we are in, the sports betting game, is riddled with fakes, riddled with phonies. We know that, right? It's one of the slimiest industries in the entire world. And something that I have to commend you for is getting on camera 2 days after you just lost money at UFC London. I didn't actually remember you had lost money until you told me right then. Now I'm getting flashbacks. I did see you posted up something on Twitter the other day after the event. But a lot of people in the industry, they'll just go running. You know, they'll go running. As soon as they have a bad weekend, they won't mention it. But here you are on stream. So first of all, shout out to you for being brave enough to speak about your losses, because we know losses mean almost nothing in the game, right? If you're long-term profitable, which I know you are because you have a third-party track record, which I always say, if you're going to listen to any sports bettor, they have to have a third-party track record, a record that is not owned by themselves or their mother or their brother or their sister. And that is what you do, and that's what we do. So we don't care if we lose one small event. It doesn't mean anything. We only care if we lose over the long term, the 6 months, the year, the 2 years. So, I'm excited to get into it, and we're going to get straight into it. But first of all, I just want to say shout out to everybody in the chat, because we've got quite a few people here. We've got 30 people, and I never really give any, I never really give any back up before I go live. I never really say I'm going live at this time. It's just like, boys, I'm going live in 10 minutes. Join me if you can. And we've already got 30 people. So shout out to everybody. I know it's quite late as well. Where is it where you are, Liam? I know it's got to be quite late, but I know you're a night man.
Absolutely. 1:35 a.m. And honestly, James, I was sick as a dog yesterday after the fights concluded for whatever reason, went to bed at around 6:15 p.m. So I slept 14 hours or something, woke up today, and I'm feeling so much better that I can't even describe. So excited to get after it. Excited to keep it going, my man. And 1:35 a.m. here, but I feel like it's just getting started.
Yeah, and speaking of going to sleep, waking up, all of that sort of stuff, I actually stayed up super late for this UFC London card because obviously I'm from London originally, right? And so I used to stay up to 3, 4 a.m. every single fight card when I lived in London. I mean, not every single one, but a lot of times I stayed up through the night to watch the fights, because 8 p.m. or whatever it is in Vegas is like 3 a.m. in London. So every single weekend, or the big weekends, I used to stay up throughout the night. And I actually got a taste of my old medicine, not own medicine, because the fights were on in London, meaning that where I live now in New Zealand, the first fight started at 3 a.m. and the last fight was on at 10 a.m. I actually did an all-nighter. I stayed up the entire night, went to sleep after Aspinall knocked out Tybura, cashed me a check on that. So I was able to go to sleep a lot more happy than if he didn't get the KO. But I was just completely wrecked, man. I'm only just coming right now. So hopefully the stream goes well, but I'm sure it will. Narco Cop, my man, saying me and James are cooking steaks at Narco's last year. 100%, man. Next year I'm coming. And if anybody doesn't know Narco, he's got the YouTube channel and he's got the podcast with Tim Troiano called Lambo Plays. Now, Liam, I've been telling Narco for many, many months, even maybe a year, that I'm going to pull up to Narco, outside Narco's house, in a Lamborghini, and we're going to do a live Lambo Plays podcast in a Lambo. It's got to be done. I've hyped it up too much now, so I'm going to have to do that, bro.
I absolutely love it. Great idea. Great content piece. You know I'm watching that one and supporting 100%. That sounds fire.
Yeah, it's going to be good fun, man. There's lots of comments. I can't get through them all. I just want to say thanks to everyone for being here. Captain Service saying, ask and we shall receive, I guess. And that's because my man Captain Service, me and him are on the DMs every now and then. And he said, look, if you do, you should go live every single week with Liam because I really liked your podcast. And hey, that was last week, he told me. And this is this week. And this wasn't planned, to be honest, you know. This wasn't planned. This was kind of impromptu thing. So I guess you manifested it, Captain Service. A shout out to you. Narco saying steaks on meat, man. I appreciate the donation. 2 donations in a row. I've never got that on the stream before, Liam. I've never got 2 donations. So I want to, you know, that's a big thing for me. Shout out. Cook the steaks on a Lambo. Yeah, you already know, man. The engine's going to be running and hot, especially where Narco lives. I think he lives somewhere in the desert. But without further ado, we'll get straight into it. UFC London. I'm just going to think of the first fight that comes to my mind was my guy, someone I'm quite friendly with. I actually have a video with him on this channel. I don't know if you've seen it, Liam, but if anybody wants to go and watch it, it just goes into the life history. And me and this dude just bullshit for about an hour. And he was fighting this weekend. So I was invested not only in the fight, because I did actually make a wager on the fight, but also in him. I wanted him to win. And that is Nathaniel Wood, right? Nathaniel Wood is the UFC's only fighter from London. And because I'm from London, instantly, you know, I like him. We connected. And he fought really well, man. I did think he was going to win the fight. I did predict him to win the fight. I didn't want to lay the minus 190 money line. I didn't want to lay the minus 225 where it jumped out to. I didn't want to play Feely at plus 170 either. And, you know, in some regard, you may say that Feely was value in that fight, but it's tough, man. I don't think minus 200 Nathaniel Wood is that crazy. You know, I mean, sometimes we hear minus 200 and we think like, oh, that's such an, you know, that's such a wide line. But at the end of the day, minus 200 just means, what is that, Liam? About 66%, 67% implied. So, I mean, to say that Nathaniel Wood wins that fight 6.5 times out of 10, I mean, it's not that crazy to me. It was a great fight, though, man. I will say, like, Nathaniel rocked him multiple times. Feely rocked him as well. Feely got his back, which he loves that position, you know, getting the back take. And Nathaniel was able to spin out of it, which I was quite impressed with because we've seen Feely dominate a lot of people from back control, but he wasn't able to do it to Nathaniel Wood. I will say that, yeah, I'm just going to, you know, spitball here, go around the houses. You know, there's not too much of a layout, but like some of the things that come into mind in that fight was Nathaniel, he didn't look that big in there. You know, for a featherweight guy, I didn't think he looked like a massive featherweight. You know, oftentimes we see these fighters move up and they look bigger at the bigger weight than they did at the smaller weight. You know, sometimes it's just the natural body wants to go up in weight. I'm not sure I can say the same about Nathan. Like, I don't think that he looked like a massive 145. Contrarily, if we look at Brian Barbarena, I don't think he looked like a small 170 there. I actually was surprised with his size and even strength in some of the grappling positions. Although he did get dominated in the grappling, I was still surprised with some of his strength. I mean, he never got held down. He got back to his feet every time. So with Nathaniel Wood, I would say that, like, he's not going to cut. I know that now, right? Like, I've spoken to him. He's made it very clear on his interviews. He's not going back down to 135. He's 28 years old, I think. I mean, at this point in his career, he's like, you know what? 145 is where I am. And I understand that. Some of the advantages that he has at 145 are not, I mean, are still there, right? Like, his speed at 145, I think, is evident. Feely's not a slow guy. Feely's a fairly fast guy. But Nathaniel Wood was first to the punch on almost every exchange. You know, it was that Feely was catching him. But in terms of the speed, I think Nathaniel Wood most certainly has an advantage there. Maybe when he starts fighting these guys who are going to wrestle him heavily, maybe that's when the size will come into play. But I think Nathaniel Wood showed out great. And the bet I had in that fight was the under 2.5 rounds at plus 190. So I don't know if he was on that bet as well, but if not, I'm sure you can still share my pain because that was a tough bet to not cash. You know, both fighters got knockdowns and both fighters have multiple wobbles. And I think it was every single round, there was a decent chance of finishing. So it's always horrible to cash. You know, it's not sometimes, and this is something that people can use to recap their bets as well. Oftentimes, if you have a bet on an under or it doesn't go to decision, the first round could be crazy, right? But then the second and third round, it's kind of like a low-paced affair. Nothing much happens. And then everyone will shout from the rooftop, oh, you know, my under didn't cash. He got dropped in the first round. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the under should have cashed or that you made a good bet. Because oftentimes, and you will know this just in general, maybe even from competing, you know, like early on in fights, there's a lot of nervous energy. A lot of things happen that necessarily wouldn't happen in the long term. That's why we see a lot of first round knockouts. The round that the fights finished in are the most are obviously the first. We have this saying called 1 minute chin, means that if you get hit within the first minute, your chin, you might go down. But if you survive that 1 minute, you might be fine. But this one was not that, right? There was like knockdowns and wobbles in every single round, you know, which taught me that I was happy with my bet at under 2.5 rounds. So, yeah, Nathaniel's going to go on to do some good things in the featherweight division. He called out Korean Zombie and Edson Barbosa after the fight in the post-fight press conference. I will say that I wish he called them out in cage because that's when the UFC runs the promos. It seems like more often than not, if the fighter calls a fighter out in cage post-fight, they usually get matched up with that fighter. When they speak their name in the press conference, it doesn't hold as much weight. So I wish he would have said what he said in the press conference in the, in the cage, but it is what it is. He's called for those two fighters. I'm interested to see if they match him up with them because they're two legends of the division and there'd be tough fights for him, even Korean Zombie at this stage. But I do think they're both winnable fights for him. I hold Nathaniel Wood in high regard. So yeah, man, just give us your recap on that fight. It got fight of the night, so no surprise I'm speaking about it first. How did you think it played out? And I do want to hear your opinion, not only on where Nathaniel will go in the future after this, but also in terms of bets. You know, do you think Nathaniel Moneyline was about accurate as I do? Do you share my pain on under 2.5 rounds? Just give us a synopsis on the bets there, the feeling, Nathaniel, and the total side.
Yeah, I think there's a fine line in betting at times because you look at that bet and on the one hand, you're trying to cap durability. You're trying to think of how these guys are going to do if they do get hit, if things go poorly. Can they recover from a bad situation? And that was the thing that gave some strength to Nathaniel Wood there, right? He was able to make adjustments. He was able to recover. His durability and recoverability were on point. I think the number one factor that I brought into that fight was the direction in which both guys are going. You know, Andre Fili, a guy who in his last 2 wins in the UFC, they were both split decisions. He's 2-3 in his last 5 fights. That's not to say he can't win a fight, but it's to say he's not getting over by a big margin when he's winning. And now he's got to take on a guy who is by definition going to throw more volume than him in his hometown. Very hard fight to win unless you finish. So that was a fight in which I was taking into account the local market. I was taking into account, to your point, James, there's a lot of fighters from England. There's one fighter from London, and it was Nathaniel Wood. So I felt like if there was going to be any bias saved up and juiced out to one fighter, it would be Wood. But on the other hand, we know that the number one predictive thing, and shout out to Technical Tim, he was talking about this on the Gambler's Perspective last week, but it's about people who land head strikes in these fights. Like that's what's going to win it ultimately is people that land head strikes that convinces the judges more often than not. And so in this kind of fight, I felt like the guy who was landing more, going first, throwing more was Nathaniel Wood. And I feel like that's always going to be the case. The thing is, we saw Andre Fili's win condition play out before us, right? He took the back at one point. He landed the big shots early that people thought he could. But at the end of the day, he's not a guy with great finishing instincts. He hasn't produced that many finishes, and he's 33, so it's probably the wrong direction for Andre Fili moving forward. By the way, I don't say this out of malice or anything like that, but I've just been on this Andre Fili fade train a little bit on this run, and so I've been getting good profit off seeing him moving in the wrong direction. He's not a guy that's a bad fighter, but he's a guy that is just not producing elite level results. When he's faced elite level guys or high level guys, he's always struggled. You can see that from the Yair fight all the way on to the present. So he's a good fighter, but he's a good measuring stick. And the UFC uses him accordingly. Nathaniel Wood, 2-0 as a featherweight prospect coming in here. I gave him that respect. So I ended up not playing the fight at all. But I agree with you. I felt minus 200, minus 230. That just seemed right to me. My prediction early this week on Patreon, I think last Monday, was unanimous decision. just because that's what it felt like this fight was going to turn into more often than not. I also said Wood sub 3 was like the other outcome I could see, where I just thought he could hurt Feely late and tire him out. But overall, Feely continues to show his grit and his toughness. Unless you put him out, he's not going to quit in a fight. But he also just was a little bit outworked by a younger man who has more speed and a little bit more athleticism, in my view.
Yeah, 100% right. And that was my official prediction as well, Nathaniel Wood via decision. And I actually played, I think me and you looked at the fight fairly similarly because we predicted the same outcome, which came correct. And also I played a very small shot, I think 0.2 units on Nathaniel Wood via submission at plus 1,000. And, you're saying that sub 3 was a potential there as well. And so we had the same idea. I thought this fight would play out as an absolute war, but that Nathaniel Wood would always be 1 or 2 steps ahead. And that ultimately I could see him getting a rear naked choke in the third, literally after an absolute war. Or the second, I thought both fighters would be bloody. And I thought that they would go to decision. I predicted that, but I really liked the numbers on the plus 1,000 submission line, and also the under 2.5 rounds at plus 190. I'd like to hear your opinion on the under 2.5 rounds, because on the one hand, like you said, we have to take into account, and we have to take massive account into, and I think this is like everyone's got different ways of betting, right? And I see multiple gamblers out there who they always underrate the finishing threat. And they say, if this knockout doesn't happen, then how did the fight play out? But oftentimes you could say that with Aspinall and Tybura, but Aspinall probably knocks that dude out 9 times out of 10. So we're never going to get there, right? So a lot of people dramatically underestimate the finishing threat of fighters. On the contrary, people dramatically overestimate the finishing threat on fighters, right? They say, oh, well, Nunes is just going to go in there and steamroll Pena. There's no way she can't. But then you have to think, how did the fight play out if she doesn't do that, right? So there's multiple types of gamblers. And then on the other hand, I think there's this portion of gamblers who say, right, if it's going to be a war, I'm instantly going to bet that under. But then I think they're dramatically missing part of the puzzle, which is, even if it's a war, let's look at the durability of the guys. Because as we've just seen, Marvin Vettori was in a war with Jared Cannonier, but that dude survived. And I know it looked like Jared Cannonier was going to finish him multiple times, but he didn't. And why didn't he? Because he has one of the best chins ever. So playing an under on someone like Marvin Vettori is probably not profitable in the long run, right? So there's two schools of thought there. So on the one hand, and I'll bring it back to this fight, on the one hand, I'm looking at it like, this fight was an absolute war. I think it's always going to be a war. I think both fighters are always going to land a lot of shots. I think both fighters have submission upside and knockout upside. And it was plus 190 in the featherweight division. But on the other hand, both fighters are very durable. It's not that easy to finish both guys. You might be able to drop them, but to actually put them out, it's different. And so, you have to look at it from both stances. In my opinion, plus 190, there was value on that bet. It was a good bet at plus 190. I'm not going to say it was an amazing bet. I'd still make the under a underdog price. So I'd still make the under 2.5 a plus money price tag. I just wouldn't put it up at plus 190. I'd maybe say plus 150. I'd say 60% it goes to decision. So I'd like to see how you saw that fight. Do you think there was any value on the plus 190, or is it just too hard to say?
I think, yeah, you could definitely argue there was value. Both guys went down at a certain point in the fight. There was finishing positions on the back. To your point, both guys pretty tough, but honestly, just their UFC records, both guys have been finished in losses, so yeah. I really can't throw that out. To your point, plus money, you're willing to take on more risk and play into a little bit more variance when you have a plus money price tag available. So, at almost 2-1, then I definitely see some value in it. But I also just look for fights, if I can, where it's a heavier division with a similar priced under, or something like that, where I always look at the divisional finishing rates and some things and try and compare and contrast. But even then, the bookmakers, in my opinion, are getting a little bit better at tuning that. So a little less value to be had for some of those totals on my end. But what I've been looking to do this year is look for correlated winners and totals. So there's a few books that offer the correlated parlays of a winner and a total. I very rarely take those unless they're insane value to the market. And there's been a couple times like Blanchfield in under 2.5 rounds was plus 545. And she literally has all of her wins, I think, except for one inside the first 2 rounds. So it just made no sense, right? Not math. But that's the thing is if you can get a mathematical edge, take it. And I feel like in that kind of fight, if you're getting multiple knockdowns, if you're getting back takes, it's a fight where plus 190 makes sense.
Yeah, fair enough. It's always good to get a second opinion, because at the end of the day, man, I've been gambling for 15 years. I've been gambling, full time for almost 4 or 5 years. And I've also been, gambling it almost every week for like 10 years. But I still make mistakes a lot. And I still respect other people's opinions. And in fighting, it's very hard to get a concrete edge after the fight. It's very hard to find the true line after one fight. Because we've seen Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno play out 4 times, and every single time they went completely differently, right? And we see this all the time with trilogies, and we'll actually speak about a rematch soon with Poirier and Dustin, Poirier and Gaethje. So it's always good to get a second opinion on the true line of fights, But I'll always say, like, if you see people parading around after a fight, speaking about they know the true line, just look at that guy closely, because there are some spots where we can say we know about the true line, right? I think Ailin Perez versus Ashley Evans-Smith is a great example of this. I won't go too in depth, but I had my biggest bet of the year, a massive bet on her, 7-unit play, and I had a lot of money on her. And I think after that fight, it's clear she was up around, coming up close to 90% in that fight. No matter what happened, not much can change. Ashley, really no finishing upside. Ailin's never going to gas dramatically doing the same as what she did. She's always going to be able to get takedowns. It's very kind of easy to determine the true line. But there are lots of fights where it's very hard to determine the true line. So I'll just put a warning out there for anybody listening to content creators like us. When people parade that they know the true line after every single fight and make massive comments on how the fight should have went or their bet was value, just take a look at them a little bit closer, because it's very hard to make concrete statements like that, even after an iteration of one fight. Something I want to mention as well, and we'll get into another fight. We'll just speak about this quickly. The reason I thought of it was because when you were speaking about the divisional finishing rates, right? And so someone who popularized this in the scene is Z's MMA. I know you know Z, someone who showed us both love. He's not really in the scene that much anymore, but shout out to Z. I mean, the underdog mug from Z's MMA himself is on display. I've actually got the lucrative mug right now, but that is my favorite mug, the underdog mug. It's very big. It can hold a big cup of tea. In your case, probably a big cup of coffee, but especially if you're up at 1:35 a.m. But shout out to Z's MMA, and he kind of popularized that divisional finishing rate type thing. He kept mentioning it on stream, and that is something that is smart to do. But the thing about that is we can also assume that the bookies do that a little bit as well. Because I don't think the bookies are sitting there doing 50 hours of tape, 20 hours of tape a week like we are, right? But they do look at divisional finishing rates. They do look at topology. They do look at statistics. They do look at stuff like this and set up an algorithm to sort out their own lines. But sometimes you can capitalize on that by watching tape. And the one way I did that was this weekend, actually. So, we say that most heavyweight fights go under. So then we had Jamar Pogues versus Mick Parkin, right? And that was a heavyweight fight. And I looked at that fight and I was like, this fight's going to decision. Both fighters are tough. Both fighters haven't really been tested at a massive level. Both fighters are fairly evenly matched on the level. So I just felt that this was going to be a fight where Pogues not going to be able to take Parkin down. I didn't believe so. I know a lot of people were on the Pogues train here. I actually bet on Mick Parkin. I bet Parkin via decision at plus 700, which was obviously a great play in hindsight. And I also bet a larger bet on the fight goes to decision at plus 120. And that was a clear fight to me where, like, all the stats say otherwise. Like Mick Parkin, I think he had never gone to a third round or something like that. I mean, he hadn't gone past the second round in many, many years. But I think in his amateur career he did. But I think pro, he hadn't done it, right? And it was like all the signs point to it going under. But if you actually watch the tape, it looks like both fighters could go over. And that's what happened there. So, yeah, I mean, we won't go into the fight too much, but I'd be interested to see if you had a bet on that fight at all. If you did, let me know what you bet on. If not, just quick synopsis of the fight.
Yeah, it's disgusting because no, I did not bet it, but my article prediction was Jamal Pogues by split decision. And we always talk about, if you're talking about a split decision, you're going to want to have the plus money ticket in your hand more often than not. I didn't bet on the fight at all, but just looking back, when that's your analysis, just like with the Stolyarenko fight, my analysis was, yeah, Molly McCann's going to have to survive all these terrible positions in round 1, but then she'll come back in round 2. It's like, well, no, let's not make such big assumptions here. So in that case, also going against the home crowd narrative, where I thought that should have been at least the factor that pushes me to the other side. If I'm thinking it's already a split decision, it's in the guy's hometown and he's flanked by Aspinall and crew. So overall, just a real miss by me. I was a lot different than the general community. I was not saying this guy, Mick Parkin's going to be a fraud. I was saying this guy, Mick Parkin's surrounded by good guys. I have no reason to believe he's bad, but he hasn't fought good guys. So I can't really bank on it either. Hasn't gone too late. Can't bank on that either. So for me, probably should have just had a small bet on the dog and left it alone, or just passed on the fight overall. So that's what I did. I passed on the fight. But, just looking back, when you read split decision for the guy who's out of town, and then you don't bet on the underdog for a small stake, you just kick yourself.
Yeah. And also to add to that, you predicted split decision, so maybe you should have been on the plus money Parkin. But you predicted decision, so maybe you should have been on the over or the goes to decision. So
I should have been on something, James. I should have made money there.
Yeah. And there was 2+ money that you missed out on there. But man, it happens every week. At the end of the day, Liam, it happens every week with me, like literally every week, where I can't think of a week it doesn't happen, where I predict something, it happens, and I didn't play it. Even if it's plus money. So we kind of like was Myra Buena Silva the other week. I actually did a stream with you, this same stream, early look, and me and you, we both said Myra Buena Silva. I don't know why the whole world is on home. I'm going to look for that, maybe the under, and I think Myra can get a submission here. I know you bet Myra sub, did you not?
I bet Myra money line, and I bet Myra KO. Unfortunately, she was beating her up, but she ended up taking the sub instead.
Yeah, but you still made money on that because obviously big plus money tickets. So, that was exactly one like you. Like I predicted it. I said it was going to happen, and I literally didn't pull the trigger. And a section I have on my website, I have like 8 different sections where I provide more content. So I have a full card breakdown for every single fight on the card, even if I don't have a bet on it. And I have one section which is called the current betting leans, right? And I know a lot of people in the sports betting space like, oh, you should never mention leans and stuff. But I mean, I do that prior to the fights, not after the fights, like come out saying that was my lean. I don't do that, but I provide it to my members prior to the fights because it gives them an idea of what bets I'm looking at betting, whether I bet or not. So oftentimes I'll put like 5 or 6 leans up there, which is literally what we're going to do in this video. We're going to speak about our leans, right? But I just put it on text format. And one of the leans I had was Myra and under 4.5. So it is what it is, man. It happens. We just got to live and learn, right? Bro, I'll let you take the mic for a second. Is there, maybe we'll do like one more fight on the UFC London card, maybe 1 or 2. I guess we should probably speak about the main event. But is there any fight you want to speak about on the London card to recap?
Sure. The one that you had mentioned before, which was Brian Barbarena, I just wanted to give some credit to Barb because frankly, I bet the fight ends by sub at plus 1100, or excuse me, plus 900. I bet Muradov by sub at plus 1100 there for a total of 0.4 units exposure. So didn't cash it, but I feel like in the end, I'd make the same bet again based on how the fight played out. A lot of my analysis was on point there, which was that I thought Muradov would come out shooting takedowns. I thought that Barbarena would get taken down. And I thought that eventually he would tire out. The one thing that I was wrong about is he just didn't tire out, man. He fought the whole time hard for 15 minutes. I even thought Muradov fought pretty hard for the whole 15 minutes, given the wrestling pace that he was putting on. So he was slowing down. There's a couple awkward exchanges in that fight as well. I think that bailed him out a little bit. But the read was on point there. And this is what we talk about sometimes where you're going to bet into these numbers and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. If you have a fight where you say going in, the guy's going to shoot for 1 million takedowns. By the way, Barbarena went for a few submissions of his own that were half-hearted. I don't even think they got counted, but looking for the neck, looking for a couple out of position things. And when Muradov, who's not a primary grappler, comes in with a grappling heavy game plan, that could set up the other guy to win by sub as well. So Barbarena is not the guy to finish the job there, but I still feel good about those bets, even though I didn't cash. And I think that's something that you can understand as somebody that's in the space for a long time. But other people, the just pick winners crowd is like, what do you mean there was value on the plus 900? It's like, when you can get 9 takedowns in a fight, 10 takedowns in a fight, that's going to facilitate so many more subs on average than a fight where no takedowns take place. So when you're betting into big plus money, these are the risks we're willing to take. And I still feel good about it. So I'm going to continue to take those long shot props. And when they pay off, people are going to be like, oh my God, but that's just the name of the game. Sometimes you got to be willing to throw one out. That was a good bet. So,
yeah. So I was actually on the same side in terms of bets on that fight. I do look at it a little bit differently than you, to be honest, and I'll tell you why. So just going back to Muradov, he actually got 13 takedowns. 13 takedowns of 16. So, I mean, every time he shot, you basically got a takedown. He also got 5 minutes of control time. So you would expect that would result in some type of submission. But it just seemed to me that Muradov wanted no parts of a submission. You as a grappler, Liam, you must have been there like, oh my God, take the guy's back. I mean, he had his back for the entire fight, it seemed like, and he just never put hooks in. You know, he put one hook in to kind of wrestle him, ride him, but he never put both hooks in. He never attempted to jump on the back. He never attempted anything. And I think that was something that I missed in tape, right? So, like, he has got some submissions before. He did go for one submission in the UFC prior to this. So, you know, not many. But I just thought that he would be able to consolidate position on top better, which he wasn't able to do. So, again, maybe a bit of a lack of a read from me. Because Barb, the reason he got 13 takedowns was because Barb got up 13 times, you know? So we have to remember that as well. I thought they would be able to consolidate some top time, which would open up more submissions, which I was wrong about. And also, he just had no care about taking the back, which I thought would be the most optimal path for him, because Barb always gives up the back. We've seen it submitted by Gunny Nelson recently because of that very fact, right? So I had some miscalculations there. I thought that he would consolidate position for the submission, and I also thought he would take the back. So I have to own up, and I have to step back and say, okay, James, you made a mistake there. 2 of the things you thought would happen didn't happen. But then I also have to take a step back and say, yeah, but even though it didn't happen in this iteration, maybe Muradov takes the back next time, right? Maybe he just wasn't interested for whatever reason. So there is some nuance to that. And also, it was very hard to project how Barb would look at 185, you know? It was very hard for me to say 100% that he was not going to gas. So if he did gas, which is hard to project moving up in weight class against someone who beat the hell out of him, right? I thought maybe come round 2, he's going to be damaged so much, he might just give up the neck, right? So it's very hard to project how he's going to look at a new weight class. So that's some more nuance baked into it. But just watching that fight play out, I wasn't in love with my Muradov submission play at like 1,600 or 1,400. I wasn't in love with it. I did like my Muradov inside the distance play at plus 140 because he beat the hell out of him. He got 2 official knockdowns on UFC stats, but he had many, many other finishing opportunities on the feet. You know, I was very, very surprised that Barbarena was able to take the punishment he did. And again, that's moving up to 185 because, I mean, the guy was getting dropped by Jason Witter, 170. And now he moves up to 185 and he's able to take like a 10-minute beatdown, you know, and I think a lot of that is predicated on moving up to 185. I know Barb's a tough guy, but I still didn't think he'd be able to walk through all the shots that he did. And he walked through a hell of a lot. There was multiple times in that fight where I thought, I mean, this is finished. I don't know if you remember, but Muradov actually tried to do a walk-off KO. He dropped him so hard. He went to walk off, then he went to walk to him, and then Barb was up 10 seconds later. I was like, what does it take to kill this guy? You know, so I didn't mind my inside the distance play. I also played Muradov money line. So I don't often lay big chalk like that, but I thought that the level difference was way too much. And I was a little bit scared at some point because, you know, I thought Barbarena was outpacing him. Muradov was going to kind of gas and die via Homer Simpson. You know, we've seen it happen in UFC sometimes where the fighter just takes a million shots and then gets a finish, like Pat Barry and that dude, I can't remember, Cheek Congo, was it? Yeah, Czech Congo, the one that he just gets knocked out 9 times and then he finds a knockout because the other guy's just completely done at the time. So I was thinking that was a possibility, but yeah, I was happy with the money line play, happy with it inside the distance. The submission, it was hard for me to, you know, to fully find the true line of that, but I guess I don't hate it.
I mean, at 1,600, you're looking at less than 6%, and I feel like that finishes by sub well over 10% of the time, honestly, because Barbarena attempted a few himself, and again, we're kind of just projecting out here, but based on watching as many fights as we do, you know, I think it's something like 20. I'd have to look, but I think it's something like 20% end by sub overall. So to think that like in this kind of fight where there's a lot of grappling, I feel like there was a chance, and at 185, I feel like there's more submissions than at like 205 and heavyweight because of the size and the awkwardness. I feel like there's more athletic people at 185. And honestly, to your point, what we learned about Brian Barberena is he's better at middleweight than he was at welterweight, at least in that iteration, I felt like, because his durability looked better. His cardio looked just fine at 185 pounds. And normally what saps you about going up in weight is somebody big leaning on you, weighing on you heavy with that body. Yo, Muradov is huge. He had a huge body size advantage. That's why I thought Muradov was the clear side there after doing research, right? My pre-lean was like, Muradov, I don't really believe in the guy. I faded him with, what's his name? And then I was like, wait, this is at 85? Like, I was like, hold on a second. Brian Barberena at 85 is a problem for me. And so ultimately, I would probably not do it again. But based on what we knew before the fight, going in, I think the only thing I would change is that I would have just bet the ends by sub for 0.25 units and then moved on, because I felt like Muradov was maybe no more likely than Barbarena to get the sub, but I felt like the dynamic was still there. Constant grappling, constant wrestling, two guys that aren't too proficient so they could make a mistake. But the other credit I want to give is the two high-level black belts at 170 that finished Barbarena via sub, because the truth is Muradov, he's just not that level of grappler. I thought it was going to be the size, the physicality, the intangibles, and the stylistic dynamic that would lend to a sub. But overall, it was just a class difference from an RDA, from a what's his name, Gunnar Nelson, both two high-level black belts in the UFC.
Yeah, exactly, man. And I knew that going in, and that's why we was getting 1,400 on Muradov sub. Do you know what I mean? Like, the books were also knew it. So it's not like I was playing this sub at like 400 or something like that. The reason he had been the only reason he had been subbed is because he was going against elite grapplers that know how to take the back very quickly. Gunnar Nelson, one of the best back takers in the sport, bar none. You know, he's up there with one of the best in the entire sport in the modern day, right? And Muradov just didn't do that. But I just felt like, you know, even if you're not a good back taker, the back's there so much. Like, at least try it once. You know what I mean? Like, he had the back all fight, Liam. Like, try it once, just one time. You might get it. If you don't get it, you're a tough guy. You probably won't get finished. I mean, I know falling off the back isn't great, but just scramble to your feet and then never do it again. At least try once, at least to cash my sub ticket, you know?
You know what I think it was, James? I think my man was like, I am on the chopping block. If I lose to Brian Barberena, I am fired 100%. And I think he actually said they said on broadcast it was his last fight on his contract. Yeah. I don't even know if that gets him another contract, to be honest, because it was really close. And I felt like they were sending Barberena out there to see if this guy can produce any kind of real finishes or results. And to be honest with you, it's been a little bit of a letdown in the UFC. Muradov overall needs 3 rounds to even try and start hurting somebody most of the time. It's just some things that I don't love personally, because we like guys that could go out there and finish a fight right in the first round, right? Cash you the ticket before you have to sweat it. And this guy Muradov always seems to find a way to drag these fights late, and it's not always to his favor. So.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that was a good showing from Barb, even though he got absolutely destroyed. It was like the level difference was too much, but you could tell that the heart and the cardio and the pace. And I think Dan from Best Fight Pick said Barbarena probably wins a fight to the death, you know, and I'd have to agree. It doesn't mean anything in the UFC or to his income per year or on his taxes, but it seemed like Muradov would probably be finished if that was a 5 or a 6 or a 7 rounder, you know, but the level difference was just too much for Barbarena at that point. And sometimes we get that fight where the skills, like Muradov is such a better skill for skill than Barbarena, that was just too much. But, you know, just closing off on Barbarena, I know he looks smaller and I thought he looked smaller, but his back was huge, man. I don't know if you noticed that, but in the grappling, his back was massive. It was like this big, you know, it was much bigger than at 170. So like we said with Nathaniel Wood, sometimes when you move up in weight, you actually look bigger at that weight than you did. And I thought Barbarena probably suits middleweight, but you know, when he comes up against somebody who's even stronger, who has one punch power at middleweight, I think that's when it could be trouble, because Barbarena wasn't like a fast 170er. So I don't think that he's going to benefit from speed going up to 185. You know what I mean? So he's probably going to still be as slow as 185ers, but he's still going to get caught, right? So yeah, but I mean, that was a good showing from Barber. I was impressed, to be honest, even though he got beat the fuck up. And I'd be interested to see his next fight, because Barbarena is always a tough out for anybody in the division. So last fight we'll speak about, I mean, look, we could go on forever, but I don't want to. I guess we got to touch on Tom Aspinall Tybura, because it was the main event. Where do you think Tom's ceiling is, man? Do you think this guy could beat a John Jones? I know we still don't know much about him. Like, the things we don't know about him is his cardio, his heart, and his toughness. We don't know those things about him. No matter how much you love about Tom Aspinall, you cannot sit in front of me with a straight face and tell me you know those things, because you don't. And I don't either. So those things are yet to be tested, and those things are massive, especially when you're talking about 5-round fights, and especially when you're talking about championship fights, right? You need heart, you need toughness, and you need cardio, right? Those are like massive intangibles. I mean, every champion almost ever has those three things, and all the best fighters ever have those three things in spades. Think of Alexander Volkanovski, his cardio, heart, and toughness. We've never seen that level before. Do you know what I mean? Khabib, cardio, heart, toughness. You know, the best fighters in the sport, these things are massive. So the jury is still out on Tom Aspinall in that regard. In terms of his skill sets, one of the best heavyweight strikers I've ever seen. His speed is unbelievable, unmatched. The guy moves like a fast middleweight, but he's a heavyweight. It's unbelievable the way he bounces in and out of range. And not only does he do that, but he has insane power. Because somebody else who does that is Cyril Gane. But Cyril Gane doesn't have power. Tom Aspinall has insane power, insane time, and insane speed. He's very athletic, so he's going to be hard to be taken down just from that athletic position. And I know the guy's been doing jiu-jitsu for like 10 years, man, 15 years even. So I know he's going to be good on the ground. We saw him tap out Volkov with a straight arm lock, which was a bit weird to see Volkov, someone of that size, be tapped out of a straight arm lock. I would have thought he would be strong enough to defend that, but, you know, it is what it is. So we know Tom is the real deal. We just don't know if he's the real deal over 5 rounds. That's the only thing. So what's your opinion on Tom, man? I mean, we can speak about the fight. It was a quick knockout. It was a beautiful knockout. It was a really good knockout. I had a bet on the KO at -150, just for someone who's -500 when the fight doesn't go to decision, was -1,000, and Tom's -500 and his KO line is -150. It was just like, yeah, all right. And then on top of that, Tybura had been knocked out multiple times, and he'd never fought a striker on the level of Tom Aspinall. It was an easy bet for me. One of my favorite bets of the night, actually. Even though it was easy, it was one of my favorites because it was so easy. But yeah, man, how do you feel about the fight? And just Tom in general, his chances against... First, tell me the winner of Cyril Gane and Spivak, because he's actually called those fighters out. He's probably going to go to UFC Paris and watch it live. And then let's say he wins that and he goes on to fight the potential champions of John Jones, Stipe, or Sergey. How do you think he does in those fights?
It's a very interesting question. You know, I actually stayed away from the main event because I had some questions about Tom coming in, coming off surgery. To your point, he's a very bouncy individual. You know, a lot of inside, outside footwork, a lot of speed that his game relies on. It's kind of predicated on. Even if you look at that Volkov fight, I felt like one thing is always good to do is analyze your bets post hoc, right? After the fights have taken place, was it good? Was it bad? Like we're doing here. And so I had done that with my Volkov bet, and I expected Volkov was going to offer him a little more resistance. I was like, if Aspinall tries to take him down, he's going to dig underhooks, and he's pretty good at that. Go see the Marcin Tybura fight for an example where he stuffs every takedown attempt, and there's like a million of them. But when you look at this, fight, you can see the exact moment that Aspinall takes him down. He slips, comes in and out of range, and then fires a double leg, gets him right off his feet, no resistance, and then he passes, finishes the fight. So the speed and quickness with which he works on the feet did translate in that instance to work on the ground. I think a small piece of that was Volkov coming in as Dad Volkov there, kind of just didn't seem like himself. I felt like in that fight looked a little flat, but also a really good fighter can do that to you. So then we see him come out here. Marcin Tybura kind of been, funny to say this about Marcin Tybura, right? But in the last few years, the picture of consistency. Hasn't been knocked out since 2019, won 7 of his last 8 fights coming in here. So you really can't poke holes in that resume, right? Was it the highest level UFC heavyweights? No, but he fought a bunch of guys with higher athletic potential that wailed on him early. He took the shots, came back, stormed back on them, took them down, and finished them. So when you looked at this fight, that's where the intriguing question could come, is if he can extend the fight. But in any case, my initial read on this fight was that Tom Aspinall just has too much athleticism, too much dynamism, that if he looks like himself, if he looks like the guy we saw last, he should easily finish Tybura. But the problem for me with the money line was the assumption that he was going to come back and look the exact same. Also, you're asking me to say that 85% of the time this guy's going to come out here and win, when the last time before one strike had been exchanged, the fight's over. So it's just, for me, those were a couple of things that from a theoretical standpoint, I just don't get involved. But to your point, buying down to that money line at -150, I mean, Marcin Tybura has been chinned a million times. He's had a bunch of pro cage fights for over many years against the likes of Fabricio Verdum. The man's never been submitted. So I felt like the only way Aspinall was going to get the sub here is if he either clubbed and subbed him or if he was intentional about taking that, first submission from Aspinall. And I thought, from Tybura. And I thought he could do that if he wanted to implement that game plan, if he wanted to try and mix it in, because frankly, it doesn't matter how good you are on the ground. Fatigue makes cowards of men, right? If I'm a big, heavy guy, I get on top of you, punch you in the head 10 times, you might want to tap out anyway, right? So that was the thing where I expected Aspinall would kind of have his rule of the roost for the first 7.5 minutes of this fight. But I also gave Tybura the credit where, when you win 7 out of 8 fights at heavyweight, that takes some skill. That does take some complexity. But at the end of the day, this is why we bet on hardware, to quote Z's MMA. This is why we have to talk about guys' durability, their athletic attributes, because the ultimate problem here for Marcin Tybura is that he could have had 10 more skills and the athleticism gap never would have been bridged here.
Exactly. Athleticism is a massive, massive thing in sports and in MMA, in fighting. And something that isn't realized is that, and you'll know this, like, if you've been in and around gyms, it's like you get someone new come in the gym and they're a freak athlete and they're in the top 10 of the class within 3 months. Whereas you have people who have been going to your gym for 5 years, they're still only a blue belt and they're not really getting any better. You know what I mean? And that just literally goes down to, you can say it's mind and work ethic. Not really, man. It's athleticism, because there's things that people are going to be able to do that no matter if I train for 10 years, I'm not going to be able to do those things, right? And Tom Aspinall has those things. And that opens up such a massive just path for you in the UFC and in sports in general to go straight to the top. Being an athlete is very underrated. And we see oftentimes fighters win because they're athletic. They just consistently win because they're athletic until they come up against people that are just on such a higher level difference that the athleticism kind of cancels itself out. But there's some fighters who I don't think they're particularly great. I mean, someone like David Onama comes to mind. I know this guy's a good fighter. Of course he is. But I think a lot of his game is predicated to be around being an athlete. If this guy had no athletic prowess, and you can't, I hate playing those games, but if we just look at it, just speaking about that athletic thing, if David Onama was a bad athlete, I mean, the guy wouldn't even be in the UFC. You know what I mean? Because he's not got great boxing, great striking. His jiu-jitsu, his wrestling isn't great. He's just so powerful, so athletic. He can do things that you can't. And Tom Aspinall has that. And Marcin Tybura doesn't. So even if Tybura was able to weather the storm, I felt like Tom could get a knockout in round 3 here, even without seeing his cardio, just because of the athleticism and the dynamicism. And Tybura is always going to be there. You know what? Tybura is always going to be there walking forward. But Tom, even if he's tired, he's still going to have athletic advantages. We see fighters who are really tired in round 3 reverse position because they've just have athletic advantages. So that was something that Tom had here. And Narco's touching on it now, saying the levels in speed and athleticism was massive. Tom probably wins 90% of the time. And I would say that I don't even disagree much with that. I honestly don't. Not many heavyweight boxers have footwork like him. And yeah, he's right. Tom's hand speed is honestly insane for his size. And not only his hand speed, but his power, and obviously the power comes from that speed as well. But fighters, like Cyril Gane, I think his footwork is unbelievable. The way Cyril Gane dances in and out of range and sets up his strikes, but the guy has no power. You know what I mean? He can't finish anybody. But someone like Tom, he has the same type of style with a jumping in and out, but his power is just so much more insane. So shout out to Tom. Just quickly, I just want you to touch on, I know this is an impossible question to ask, but I would still like to hear your thoughts on him versus John Jones specifically, Liam.
Sure. I think he would present some interesting challenges. I mean, the one thing that we haven't seen John Jones get tested in quite some time is his chin, right? It's been years since he's been cracked in the chin. And the thing is, we've seen guys that are fast, that are mobile, that can kick, like Thiago Santos, give him some trouble. Even Thiago Santos on one knee, right? So the one knee problem for Tom Aspinall won't be there against John Jones. The other thing is, it's guys moving in different directions. Love John Jones. New York wrestling. We'll show you boys how to wrestle all the time, right? This is a guy who's in the New York State wrestling program. So make no mistake about it. Them New York boys been teaching you how to wrestle since John got to the UFC. However, at a certain point, the age will catch up with everybody. It will catch up with John Jones. Like it caught up to Kamaru Usman, like it caught up to Valentina Shevchenko, like it caught up to every other person that they say it won't catch up to. But the thing is, it's kind of a prove it spot for me. If I'm thinking that Tybura has a 1% chance. It's like, I don't think Tybura ever beats John Jones. They could fight in a bar 50 years from now. I take John Jones at 80 over Tybura. So that's the one thing, is like, that's the certainty I know as a competitor. Talk about the dog in you, James. I mean, what do we know about John Jones? He'll do anything to win. He's a psychopath who will do anything to win. And so I feel like that kind of guy, very hard to bet against. But in terms of the upside, in terms of the speed, the dynamic athleticism of Tom Aspinall, and very young guy, I think all that combined with the confidence, if you're talking about John Jones, that's a good sign, right? A lot of guys won't talk about John Jones for good reason. They know they would get that ass whooped. So I feel like Tom Aspinall, he's got the confidence, he's got the skills, he's got the athleticism. I would like to see him tested by somebody else first, because if he goes into that fight never having been tested, I do think that would be a real problem for him. He would be faster than John Jones, but I think them New York boys could still teach you how to wrestle a little bit.
Yeah, it'd be interesting, because one of the things that we've seen as a whole in Tom's game is the wrestling. And by the way, this is like 10 years ago. You know, I think it's literally 8 years ago against Stuart Austin, where he gets tapped out by a heel hook in like round 2 or round 3. But he gets wrestled a lot in that fight. And since then, we have never seen anyone try to wrestle him, because they got knocked out before they could try, right? So it's like, it's very tough to say he hasn't shored up them holes. But they are also holes we've seen. And as you know, Liam, sometimes you'll always have a weakness. Even if it's 10 years ago, it might have improved, but it might still be a weakness for you. So even though Tom Aspinall, I'm sure, has improved his wrestling defense since the Stuart Austin Cage Warriors 8 year ago day, it still might be his weakness. So it'll be interesting to see that fight, because John Jones, you know, is probably one of the best fighters of all time.
See Molly McCann for a recent example, right? You could work on it all you want, but it's still a weakness. And
yes,
that's what we learned on Saturday night.
Yeah, exactly. And we see that, you know, all the time, where because people always say, oh my God, I can't believe they haven't shored up their takedown defense. Oh my God, I can't believe that they haven't got their cardio in check. Oh my God, I can't believe that they haven't worked on their boxing defense. Guys, like, you have a weakness, you know, it's very rare where there's a complete hole and then it's just gone forever. It does happen, but it's not common, because you can't have everything in life. You're always going to have a weakness. So like, Tom Aspinall's weakness, it seems his weakness is the grappling. And so it'll be interesting. But I know he's got better, but has he got better enough to beat John Jones? It's an interesting one, man. Honestly, I think he poses massive threat to John Jones just because of the type of fighter he is. I really do. He seems like he's well-rounded. He's extremely athletic. But I don't know, man. It's going to be a tough fight either way for both guys, I think. Big Bird saying, am I standing up? Yes, brother. I got the standing desk. You know me. I'm in front of the computer very often, so I don't want to be sitting down all day. You know what I'm saying? It's not good for the old hips, and you need the old hips when I'm kicking people in the head. So I try to stand up a lot. You know how it goes. But yeah, let's get into this upcoming card, man, because we've been speaking about UFC London for an hour, and we'll just have a little look on this upcoming card, and then we'll see if there's any betting lines that we like first of all. And I'm just going to bring up the betting lines right now. And I'm going to tell you some stuff that stands out, Liam, and then maybe you can go in and give me your opinion. Now, I'm not necessarily saying I'm going to bet on these fights, but I am saying stuff that stands out. And by the way, I have done tape on some fights, but something that stands out instantly is going to be Miranda Maverick versus Priscilla Cachoeira. I mean, she's minus 350, so I don't think I'll be laying the money line, but that's a clear setup spot for Miranda, in my opinion. I'll be very surprised if Miranda Maverick loses that fight. She's got a very, very good chin. So Cachoeira's, you know, her way of winning is usually knocking you out on the feet. I'm not saying it's impossible, but what I will say is Miranda Maverick has a very good chin. And at 125 women's division, I don't really see a massive path of her getting a knockout, Priscilla Cachoeira, right? So 125 or 115, Liam? I think I always get it mixed up with
let me take a look here. I think it's 25. It should be 25. Yeah, 25.
Okay. Yeah, 25.
Cachoeira, it seems her last fight was at 35. Let me just double check that. But I think she's coming back down to 125 after beating Lipsky at 35. That's true.
Yeah, she moved. Yeah, she changed weight. Okay. Yeah, 125. Yeah, so this is at 125. So, you know, I'd be very surprised to see Miranda get knocked out. I honestly would. I know Priscilla hits hard, but I just would be surprised to see that. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Maverick submit Cachoeira. And at the moment, under 2.5 rounds is a good price. It was evens. I think it's probably going to keep getting bet down. But I would like to see props for Miranda by sub. I would like to see props for under 2.5 rounds. And that's definitely something I'm going to be looking at. What else stands out to me? I'm just going to rattle off a few, and then maybe you could just kind of freestyle. Stephen Thompson Poirer. I know Stephen Thompson doesn't really lose striking fights, but in my opinion, Poirer holds some weight in this fight. I think that people's time always comes. I do think Stephen Thompson is on a regression. I know he won against Kevin Holland and finished him on the feet, which is a massive order because Kevin Holland's a very, very tough guy, extremely tough guy. But he got dropped himself in that fight. He got wobbled himself in that fight. Kevin Holland had a bad injury in that fight. Who knows what would have happened if he didn't have the injury or if he didn't play around. It looked like he could have followed Stephen to the ground. Also, Poirier has some takedown upside in that fight. Not to say he's going to consistently shoot, but I do think that he may be able to get a takedown or two. So I kind of would lean to the Poirier side on that one. And the last thing I'll speak about, and then I want you to hit those 3 fights, is De Lima versus Lewis. So De Lima's been hit massively. De Lima was minus 110. Now he's minus 170. So an absolute huge money line move for De Lima. I'm not going to lie. I still might hit it. I was falling asleep at the wheel. I wanted to play it at evens, and now it's minus 170. Have I missed the boat? Probably. Does he still beat him 7 out of 10 times at this stage of his career? Maybe, man. I think Lewis is. I do not like Lewis. I don't think Lewis is a good fighter. And the way to beat De Lima is to make him gas out and to make him quit. That's the way to beat Lewis. Do you know what I mean? Unless you just blast through him as well. So it's not. I don't think Lewis is going to be out here making De Lima quit, pushing this mad pace. Even if it makes it into round 2 and round 3, where I give both fighters massive finishing upside in the first round, even more to De Lima. Lewis isn't going to be pushing his pace. So I got De Lima all day in that fight. I honestly do, man. How do you feel about those fights? Maverick fight, De Lima fight, and the other fight I mentioned, which was Stephen Thompson fight.
Got you, brother. So starting, let's take them in order, right? We've got the Miranda Maverick fight. That one's first on the card. And to be honest with you, brother, my eyes kind of drifted in the same direction that yours did, right? I'm not really looking to lay Miranda Maverick at this huge price. I do think that she should win the fight. I do think that it's a winnable fight for her, but it's a little bit wide. Also, let's look at Miranda's recent performances. Dropped the fight against Jasmine. What's that?
Shout out to Jasmine, because Jasmine won as a plus 250 underdog, and I keep cashing on that girl. She's like my money train. She's the Benil Dariush of the women's division, and Miranda Maverick was dramatically overrated in that spot.
Damn right. Jasmine has the heart. She's got the toughness. She's got the grit. Really hard to finish. So good spot there for Jasmine. She beat Shanna Young, but got the decision there. Almost a little bit of regression. She had finished her in a previous meeting. Sabina Mazo, I don't really rate that win very much. Erin Blanchfield, that's a loss that everybody's going to have to take eventually. Them New York and New Jersey girls will teach you how to wrestle as well. But then Macy Barber, very close fight, could have went either way. Prior to that, she had a lot of momentum, a lot of good things going for her in the UFC. So I feel like Miranda Maverick could get back on track. She's still very, very young. Priscilla Cachoeira, she's a girl that's got a clear weakness, right? We have seen good girls finish her on the ground. We know that in terms of that plus money underdog status, she will cheat for your money, right? She'll jab you right in the eye. She'll pull a fish hook, whatever she could do to win the fight. But she's still a little bit older in the division. She is a girl that is probably going to slow down at some point. She's cutting back to 125 here, which could be a blessing or a curse. That could harm her durability. It could harm her cardio here. So I'm interested to see how it shakes. But for me, the thing I was most drawn to, that under 2.5 at about minus 110, seems interesting to me because I think, when you envision a Cachoeira win, it's probably a split decision or a knockout that's memeish, and then when you envision a Blanchfield win, I think more often than not, she's dominating positionally on the floor en route to a submission or a TKO finish.
Yeah, and one thing about Maverick, she will go for the back, right? So like if Priscilla gives up the back, which she will, because she does, she will definitely go to the back and put hooks in. I don't have to worry about her trying to take the back, she's seasoned in that position. Yes,
Daniel Edwards in the chat said the fact she went the distance with Young makes him skittish. But I do just want to point out, because I gave her some grief about that Shanna Young is tough as fuck. And she wanted to stay in that fight so bad. She basically made it a goal for herself to make it 15 minutes. And sometimes when you're going against somebody like that who's satisfied with a loss, it's very hard to finish.
Yeah, I actually bet Miranda inside or under 2.5 rounds there at plus money or like even money or something. And it was close. You know, like I haven't rewatched the fight, but I remember thinking like, this could finish. You know what I mean? Like Miranda had her back a few times. She was dominating her. She got her down multiple times. But Shanna Young, she just stuck really tough. And to be honest, Priscilla will stick tough. Like I feel like she has this this aura around her, like she can get insta subbed. But I think she's still tough. Like she definitely has massive weakness on the ground. But even Gillian Robertson, it wasn't easy for her to finish that choke. You know what I mean? Like she had to grind for that. And she finished her with like 1 second left in the first round. Could have got to round 2, would have started on the feet. Who knows how that fight would have went if it went a couple more seconds, you know? It was very late into the first round. I don't remember exactly, but I remember it was very late when she finished her. And I don't think she's extremely easy to finish, but clear deficiencies in her jiu-jitsu. So I do think Miranda Maverick has a good chance of finishing the fight. And obviously, like you said, there is a chance that Priscilla would get the knockout. So I would look for the under there. Could be burnt, but I mean, most unders in the Priscilla fight hit, or at least look like they're going to hit, even if they don't hit, even if they go decision, because the girl just fights like a madman. You know what I mean? She walks forward, she creates chaos. And those fighters are the fighters you want to bet for unders because they just make shit happen. It's like Joel Alvarez, you know, that fight looked like it might go to decision the way it was going in the first round, but it's like Joel's just such a nutter, the way he walks forward and he just forces shit to happen, and he forced a headbutt into a knockout there, you know. So I think Priscilla is kind of the same cloth. Now, what about the Poirer? I'm leaning with the dog there, you know, pre-tape. Do you agree with me at all?
You know, it does fit kind of a system play for me, which would just be fading old fighters. You know, it's one of my favorite things to do. I know that sometimes, you know, it seems a little reductive and a little simplistic, but it's just, again, looking at the facts, looking at the evidence, things that we could separate ourselves from. Fighters that are over 38 years of age, much more prone to being knocked out. When you look at the last fight with Kevin Holland is a bonehead, right? I like Kevin Holland. He's a fun fighter. Great skills, great talent. He never fights optimally, almost ever. So he goes out there, he's putting on this banger on the feet instead of going to the ground, instead of looking for takedowns. The guy's a BJJ black belt, for Christ's sakes. He had 2 opportunities to take the back, to take top position, to get on top of Wonderboy. He just let him right back up to the feet. I think that Michel Pereira, for cardio preservation reasons, would never do that. I think if he can get on top, he will get on top in this fight. On top of that, I think on the feet, you know, we've seen Anthony Pettis, of all people, knock out Wonderboy. I mean, are we really going to say that this guy can't knock him out? It just seems a little bit foolhardy to me. He got the respect of a bunch of other strikers he's fought. I think the Chaos Williams fight comes to mind. So, you know, he's just a guy that has skills, in my view. Don't think he's completely out to lunch. But then I also see that, the loss to Tristan Connolly. And I know people like to throw that out of the cap, but it's also just like, that shows that he can be a Kevin Holland, right? He can have his Kevin Holland-like moments where he's just out there having too much fun, not taking it seriously. And when I'm betting money on you, I want you to take it effing seriously, right? It's like, if you're not – Brian Barbarena, after that fight on Saturday, yelled F, right, as loud as he could. He was mad. Okay, then I can go down with the ship. If you're as mad as I am that you didn't win the fight, okay. But if you don't care, then I don't care. And I'm not going to bet on your fights no more. So I think Pereira has kind of inched his way back, right? Showing he wants to win decisions, showing he can go out there and mix it up a little bit in multiple phases. I think if he fights smart here, he could win at 29-28. But I also believe that if he comes out here with a really good game plan, he can knock this guy out. So it's a hell of a fight. Although I will say, you know, I don't think either one of these guys is immune to getting knocked out. I do think Pereira, he's been hit a couple times cleanly in his fights. Not easy to get a hold of him because of his movement, but I do think that if Wonderboy can start picking away at him with shots, I haven't always liked his reaction to getting hit. So interesting.
Yeah, he got knocked out on a regional scene by Dusko Todorovic, and that was kind of embarrassing knockout, you know, going on to see what Dusko's done, and especially just to see Dusko's finishing threat. It's not really that existent in the UFC, and definitely not with the boxing, you know. So yeah, it's not a great loss being knocked out by him. But like you said, I do think he's improved a lot, you know, from his first day. I remember live betting Tristan Connolly. This was before I was even on social media. I live bet Tristan Connolly at like -110 after the first round when Poirer was dead. He was completely gone, and they was giving me either +100 or -110. I was with my mate in some holiday resort place in actually the South Island of New Zealand, some mountain town. We just come back from skiing, and I was watching this fight, and I was telling my mate, like, He doesn't even bet, but he did have Bet365 at the time because I was giving him picks, right? Like before I ever started giving my content out or picks online, I was giving all that stuff to my friends for free because they knew I was winning. They was always asking me, right? So my mate, he had Bet365 because he basically was just copying off me and I was helping him win money. But he hadn't logged in ages, but I know that he had been betting from when I used to tell him. And I was literally watching the fights with him and I was like, this guy's done. And he was a massive favorite going into that fight. I don't know what he was, but he was a minus 450 favorite on Tapology. And I didn't know much about him at that point. But then when I saw he gassed out, I was like, nah, this is the spot. Like, this is the hammer spot. Like, he's done. There's no way he wins the fight. And I said to my boy, yo, quickly deposit now. Like, while the fights are on, deposit, put everything you have on it. Because these times we didn't have that much money. I mean, this is like 5 years ago. Yeah, we needed money. Like, so I think he won, I don't know what it was. He won like a couple $100 and that like tided him over for the rest of the holiday trip or whatever. But that was a good memory, man. But I do think he's improved since then. And I do think he showed, like he learned from that, because although he still plays around every now and then, I think he plays around in a way that complements his style. Whereas that was the fight after his UFC debut, after he got a massive knockout over Danny Hot Chocolate, who just had an absolute war. Shout out to him. And so he was kind of getting ahead of himself. And literally since that fight, he's never fought like that again. He still plays around, but like I said, it complements his style now. When he does backflips and like capoeira kicks, that complements his style. Whereas in the Tristan Connolly fight, it literally, I don't know what the opposite word of compliment is, but it did that.
Hindered.
It hindered his style massively, right? It was not complimentary at all. So I do think he's learned from that, but it'd be a good fight. It seems like Narco's on the other side here because, he's saying his fight IQ is not good and he feel like Poirier is going to play a kicking game with the best kicker. Yeah, maybe. We'll see, man. We'll see how it goes. Ponzi gave Poirier all he can handle. Yeah, that's true. Ponzinibbio is still a good fighter, even at 36. But Thompson ain't 36. Thompson's 4 years older than that. Thompson's 40 years old. And so, I don't know, man. I'm on the Poirier side, but we'll see how it plays out. And the next fight I spoke about, Liam, was the Lima versus Lewis fight. Do you have any opinion on that? And, I know you speak a lot about market movement, so I'd be interested to hear you speak about that as well. Minus 110 to minus 170 over a couple of days.
Yeah, I was definitely a part of that move as well. I hit the minus 113 on FanDuel several days ago, sent that out as well. The reason being, when I look at a fight like this, I always look for upside intangibles. I could just tell you guys off the top, I've made a lot of money fading Derek Lewis. Looking back at this card, I think my best results ever on like any one fight card on Bet MMA. Like last week for London, I had 30 units of track profit on all the fighters on the card, and then somehow managed to bet on all fighters I hadn't bet before except Kulabau and lost money, right? So just the way we overthink this game. But now looking ahead to this week, I always look at your previous bets on next card's fighter from Bet MMA, and I have over 47 units of profit for these fighters. So I've done quite effing well betting these people. And my number one fighter on this list is Derek Lewis, and it's been fading him. I faded him with Tai Tuivasa. I faded him with Sergey Pavlovich, and I got similar, if not better, numbers to do so. In fact, the Tai Tuivasa one was plus 175 units. I was like, let's find out, because I know that Tai Tuivasa can take a punch, and I do not know that Derek Lewis can. I think one of the things that's gone unremarked upon about his career, against wrestlers, he's very good. Against everybody else, he's not very good because his striking is average at best. And when somebody's really good at striking and they're not afraid of Derek Lewis, they make him look like an amateur. Look at the Ciryl Gane fight where he lands like less than 20 strikes, where honestly, he looked like he wanted to go home in the middle of round 2 because he couldn't touch him. And Ciryl Gane, like to your point, James, doesn't have that much power. So why did he lose that fight inside the distance? Because he quit. Because he said, I don't want to fight anymore and I'm leaving. And that's no skin off his nose. He's made a lot of money. He's done a lot of good things in the sport. He fought for a title, for Christ's sakes, with a skill set of the best blue belt in Texas and a lot of power in his right hand. But I think that what we have from Derek Lewis recently is a guy who's showing up for a paycheck. And I don't mean that again with disrespect. If he comes here and proves me wrong, God bless him for it. But I see one guy who's trending up, despite the fact that they have a similar age. And I see one guy who's trending down. I see a guy in Derek Lewis who doesn't look like he wants to be in there at all. And Marcos Rogerio de Lima looks like he's making improvements every single time he steps in the cage. He's working with the guys at American Top Team. Looks like he's taking it very seriously each time out. Moved from light heavyweight to heavyweight where he's had a lot more success. And by the way, this is a guy who the vast majority of his career losses are by submission, which Derek Lewis doesn't know any. So when I look at this fight on paper, I say to myself, you have one guy who has better wrestling. He has better jiu-jitsu. He has arguably similar cardio, if not maybe better cardio. He's been fighting 15 minutes recently, getting takedowns, looking okay. So his cardio is not great. But I think in terms of the finishing equity in round one, this guy's got better low kicks. I think he's a similar puncher, maybe not quite as much power, but more hand speed, throws more to the body, more strike variety. I feel like De Lima has more to offer here. So when you look at Derek Lewis, you say to yourself, this is a guy the UFC uses to prop up athletes they like, fun style, good banger type of mentality. And Dana White said about his last fight, this is a guy we always want with the company for as long as he wants to be here. Is that incentive to go out there and work harder and get better? No, it's incentive to keep going there, cashing the check, get beat up for a little more money, and then show up and do it all again. And for me, I just like Marcos Rogerio de Lima trending in the right direction. In terms of the line movement, feel like I did my job here. I expected this to close over -150, and that's what I said in my breakdown. I was like, I think when other people see these intangibles, they're going to say there's no way that this should be the appropriate line. This isn't a pick-em fight. This is one guy who's been finished in most of his recent fights who doesn't look like he wants to be there. By the way, in his last fight, guys, he didn't land a strike. Not one. Against Sergey Spivak, who Tom Aspinall made look like an amateur, and all that. Anybody else who's in contention is making him look, just okay. Marcin Tybura gave him a tour of the octagon, for example. And Derek Lewis can't land a glove. He can't land a strike. Got taken down 8 times and quit. I don't see betting on that guy for a while.
Yeah, I agree, man. And I'm just upset I missed the line. But at the end of the day, Liam, we can't cry about missing the line. We just have to take what the markets give us. And even if this is a massive mistake people make in gambling. And I don't know if you've made this, but I've definitely made this in the past myself. And I've corrected it now, and I've been able to make a lot of money since I corrected it. And one of those things is not betting on something just because you, quote unquote, missed the line. It doesn't matter what line it used to be. The only thing that matters is if it has value on the current line. In fact, if the line has moved in your favor, right, then that means that the market also agrees. So it's actually even more of an indication to bet it, right? It's not less of an indication. When the price starts drifting out, that's like a lot. That's when you want to start worrying, because obviously it seems like the market disagrees with you. But if a line is -110 and now it's -170, and I wanted to bet at -110, maybe I still bet it at -170 if I think there's value. Narco Cop's saying -250. De Lima is accurate. And I wouldn't necessarily disagree too much. I would say 70% plus. And so for that reason, everybody in the chat's going to hear this now. You will see me with a bet on Marcos Rogerio de Lima this weekend. I don't know if I'm going to tackle it now or I'm going to wait and see if the market moves on some Derek Lewis action, because then I can get a better number on De Lima. I don't think it will. I think it will probably get worse. So for that reason, I might tackle it soon. We'll see how it goes. But that's something that you have to be aware of, man. Like, I'm speaking to everybody listening. Don't worry about missing the line. You can't do anything about that. That's the past. Just see if there's any line value at the current line and still play it. Yes, people are going to parade like a -110 ticket. You're going to parade a -170. Maybe you look a bit squarer. It doesn't really matter. Who cares who gets the best line? All that matters is you get money in your pocket. And if I can make money in my pocket from a -170 line when it was 110 a few days ago, I'm still going to do that. So I probably will play Marcos Rogerio de Lima this weekend. Was you going to say something about the line, Liam? Like, you think it was going to go back in Lewis' way or the other way, or not really?
I was going to say, I do think there's going to be some casual buyback. And I don't say that disrespectfully either. He's a big fan favorite, right? I don't think as many people that are outside the hardcore MMA community know Marcos Rogerio de Lima, but everybody knows the Black Beast, Derek Lewis. And so I do think, early in the week, James, I think you're completely right. I think this is going to continue to steam towards Marcos Rogerio de Lima as guys are doing the tape study. But I think come Friday, come weigh-in day, when the Black Beast does one of these at the weigh-in, yells to the crowd, I think we're going to see it come back down a little bit. So just a personal opinion of mine, but I think there may be some interesting props here as well as they get opened up. So going to be keeping a keen eye on this fight this week, but excited about it. It's a fun fight.
Yeah, and Frank Vituli is saying Betway is still offering -120 on De Lima. So anybody wants to bet De Lima, maybe do that or maybe don't, because I'm going to tell you something about hitting stale lines, right? So I've had many betting accounts, and I've had many accounts on the same website, right? And maybe you're not allowed to do that, but maybe I haven't done that, or maybe I have. We'll leave that here or there. But what I will say for a fact is that betting on stale lines is one of the fastest way to get your accounts banned or limited. And what I mean by stale lines are lines that are not available anywhere else market-wide. So if you've got Betway as basically the only bookie holding De Lima at -120 and everywhere else is -170, well, it's not because Betway want it to be -120, and that's not why, right? Because Betway, by the way, are not a sharp book. They're definitely not a sharp MMA book. That just means that they haven't updated. They're slacking. They're behind the game at the moment. So as soon as you hit it at -120, unless you're betting $10, but even then, as soon as you hit it, they're going to check the lines in the rest of the market. They're going to see us -170, and then there's going to be a red flag by your account saying, this guy hit us at -120 when the rest of the market was at -170. And you don't want red flags on your account. The more red flags you get, the more likely they're going to ban your account. So me personally, if I had a Betway, and Betway is a terrible bookie. I've had Betway accounts and they shut you down so quickly. They're not good at all, right? So I don't really care about Betway. I might just put a couple grand on it if they would let me and just take money from them and let them close me down because they're such a bad bookie. But if you have a good account, and by what I mean by a good account is account that you're allowed to bet a lot of money down with. If you have one of those, do not risk it by betting on a stale line at -120. It's not worth it. The amount of extra money you're going to get for betting on -120 versus -170 does not correlate with having your account banned forever. And believe me, they will do that. And Frank's saying, yeah, it's the only one. And it's exactly what I said. It's the only one because they're not leaving it there on purpose. They just made a mistake, right? So you can, so this is, and I want to touch on this as well, because I can't say that, Liam, without saying this. You should always line shop, right? So you should always try and get the best line. But when you have a line that is so different than the rest of the market, just leave it alone. Just leave it alone. If you, for example, if you can get De Lima at -150, cool, man. It's probably not a stale line. You could probably hit that. You know what I mean? But if you can get De Lima at -110 and it's -170, that's a stale line. So you have to know the difference between stale lines and actually better lines. All you need to do is check the entire market and try and get the best line that is at least in line with the average, right? Don't go on something crazily insane like that, because I've done that many times and you get banned. So I just wanted to say that because it's very important, you know, because people will see that. Everyone will go and hammer De Lima and all their accounts will be banned. And we don't want that, you know, because that's the last thing we want.
Yeah, dude. And honestly, I just want to say, folks, most people don't give away that kind of free game. Like betting is a art and a science, right? Once you learn how to win, you have to then learn how to get down. That's the second part of this, which is when they realize you're trying to win. They realize that you're not here to just give away money like most customers, and then they try and ban you from playing the game. So you have to do things to dummy yourself down, to disguise yourself. There's things that I didn't know until recently that I still will take with me moving forward. Like, for example, sharps lay 110 to win 100, whereas the casual bettor normally bets $100 and just gets back whatever they get back. Just small little psychological things. The book didn't get rich by being stupid. They get rich by being very smart, profiling every customer very specifically. So if you give them, carefully calculated inputs, you can look like a square account and then bet into them for bigger amounts. So you got to play the long-term game here as well as the short-term game. And I wish I had known that before I got my BetMGM account limited to $5. And so I did that, James, by taking really good numbers, but it lasted me 12 weeks and that's not going to be sustainable. So teach a man, to fish, they'll have a lifetime of success.
Yeah. And you can attest to this as well. Like, would you rather have your BetMGM account back and then would you pay like $400 in extra line value that you got to have your BetMGM account back and to be a Square account? Of course you would. That's priceless. I would pay thousands of dollars. I'm not going to go into where you can get this, but there's actually a market online for accounts and in circles for betting accounts that are deemed Square, and they're sold for a lot of money to sharp gamblers, because that's what they're worth. They're worth a lot of money, man. Because if you can have a Square account, you're laughing, that could go undetected for 1 to 2 years. And I mean, that's just 1 to 2 years of profit. And that's what I like to do. Like, I like speaking about fights, but to be honest, man, I like speaking about the advanced concepts in sports betting even more. I just put a 40-minute video on my website to everybody who signs up to the Elite Zone on how to not get your account banned by the bookies. And that's the type of stuff I like talking about, but that's not what this stream is about. So we'll get back to the fights. Maybe we'll hit like 1 or 2 more fights and then we'll get out of here, man. Thanks for joining me. And again, thanks to everybody in the chat. I appreciate everyone for being here. We've got 51 live viewers, and that's at like 4 a.m. in a lot of America, So, and a lot of my audience is in America. So shout out to everybody who's still rocking with us, who's still awake, who's still up. I appreciate every single one of you. And this is a good fight card, man. There's a few fights we've got to speak about. We have to speak about the main event because that's just like the main event. Honestly, Liam, I don't know whether I'm in the minority here, but it's going to be a good fight. I'm not that excited for Poirier Gaethje, man. Do you think I'm a bit crazy? It's going to be an absolute war. It's going to be a bang. I'll be excited during the fight, but like looking up to it, I'm not that excited. Do you share my lack of excitement, or am I just being a bit antichrist?
No, I get where you're coming from, man. I mean, I think number one thing that we're always looking for as MMA fans is new iterations. Like what is the next great fight that we could see? Because each fight can become its own story. But in this case, we're revisiting the next chapter of a fight that if you've been around for a long time, if you're a fan, you already saw how this story ended once. And we all know it's MMA. Everything could change. But 2 guys of a similar age, 2 guys that are both, relative proximal same place in their career. So for me, it's an interesting spot. It's a fun fight, but does it feel pay-per-view main event worthy? I'm not sure. I kind of would have preferred if they had made Poirer, and Blachowicz for the title, advance that to the main event slot. But I understand commercially why that's not as viable. So, it's just one of those unfortunate things. But overall, I will say this: I'm seeing everybody, both in the comment section here, and it's all love and respect, boys. I could be dead wrong about this, but also all over Twitter, I'm seeing a lot of love for the over. And that just, for me, is like completely contrary to how I think about fights like this. And now, granted, it is a fight where, you got 2 guys that are a little familiar with each other and this kind of thing. But I mean, I've been betting prolific violence bets on these guys for quite some time. And more often than not, they come through in spades, especially Poirier and McGregor, that trilogy. I saved myself by just spamming the unders in that trilogy. And it's come through several times.
Yeah, the only thing that I'll give credence to that is that, like, look, this is not going 5 rounds, but do I think it's going to go later into the fight? Yeah, I do. Like, I'd be pretty surprised if someone got a first-round knockout. Let me just ask you that. Would you be surprised if someone got a first-round knockout?
Yes, but I would not be surprised if somebody got a second-round knockout. I think these guys are going to beat the absolute tar out of each other. I think that they both kind of know how the other one fights, how they approach it, how much of a dog they are. I think they're both going to be trying to kill. That's my honest impression. And when you look at how Poirier's been fighting recently, I mean, the guy just is devastating with the hands. One of the hardest punchers, I feel like, in the history of the lightweight division. So when I see that against a guy who gets hit as much as Gaethje, I mean, I had Fiziev in the last fight, full disclosure, right? Square bet in the end. It was too much chalk to be laying in an elite lightweight fight. Thought he won the fight, though. I'll be fully transparent about that. I thought he won it 29-28. So when it comes down to it, great fight, great showing from Gaethje. Did it tell me that he's not going to take damage in this fight? No, it did not. So I think that this is another really violent banger type of fight. And I feel like both guys are getting to an age where I can't rely on them to survive these insane high-paced wars. I mean, think of what Dustin Poirier gave in the McGregor trilogy, the Dan Hooker fight. You could go through the Rolodex, the Eddie Alvarez fights. He has literally been in the most hellacious UFC fights I think I could think of. It's like a cumulative body of work. And then on top of that is Justin Gaethje, who has done the same thing in fewer fights. So for me, I feel like somebody's getting violently finished here, but could be wrong.
Yeah. I'll be surprised if it goes the distance. I do think it's going to go in a little bit later, but it's not it's not really the type of fight that you want to be betting an over in. You know what I mean? I guess both fighters are tough, but this is going to be an absolute war, you know? Like, they're going to knock 7 shades of shit out of each other. So it's going to be an absolute banger. It's not really, you know, one you would want to play. I guess I'd give the edge to Dustin just because he's won once before. They're very closely matched. Not most of the time, the fighter who's won wins the rematch. You know, more often than not. I don't have the exact percentage, but I know it is more than 50. So, you know, I give some edge to Dustin. He's also been fighting McGregor, who McGregor's a good fighter. I know a lot of people hate on McGregor. He's not great. He's not at that level anymore, but he's still a good fighter. Justin's been fighting at a good level too, you know, Fiziev. But I don't know. I lean with Dustin there. I don't have a massive opinion on it. What way do you lean?
I lean with Dustin, you know, and again, I'm going to do my due diligence here and make sure that the tape supports my read. But honestly, I feel pretty confident about Dustin going into this one. You know, my gut level lean here was Dustin Poirier inside the distance. You know, last fight out, I actually bet Michael Chandler bigly against Poirier. I bet Michael Chandler for 5 units. I bet Michael Chandler by sub, and then I bet the fight ends by sub. So I ended up profiting on the fight, but overall, I came away impressed by the dog in Dustin Poirier because honestly, he was in a lot of really terrible spots there, and he just out-willed Michael Chandler. You know, he wanted that fight more than him. So I felt like Chandler was the better guy, felt like he had the better positions, and he's the first man in MMA history to submit Michael Chandler, by the way. So that was, for me, just like a stunning, you know, performance. And so I came into that super impressed because, you know, the other thing, James, is that Michael Chandler's back escape is one of the best in MMA. We saw him do it against Oliveira. We've seen him do it against a million guys. I think Benson Henderson and Bellator, but just elite level guys, you know, able to take the, and he gets out of it freakishly. He does it in the training footage against Gilbert Burns and these guys too. So his back escape is one of the best in the business, but the will of Dustin Poirier in round 3, he couldn't get out and he ended up breaking there. So I feel like this guy, Dustin Poirier, is still continuing to make some marginal improvements. I feel like he's stiff in his hips, but I do not think that Justin Gaethje is half the grappler that Dustin Poirier is. Fact, I do not believe that. I don't think he spent as much time training that. I don't think he spent as much time there. So if one guy was to try and get takedowns here, I actually think the guy who would have more success is probably Poirier over the long term. We just saw in Gaethje's last fight, he went for a handful of takedowns against Fiziev. Didn't really have great stuff there, I didn't think. The one takedown he got, I thought was worth fuck all. And he's like, I finally got a takedown. You guys happy now? I was like, dude, it just didn't look very good to me. You know, it still looked quite sloppy overall. So he trains with good wrestlers, you know, a lot of positives there, but I don't like the durability of Gaethje either. He's been hurt, rocked, dropped in a million fights, and he looked great in that last fight. But I think here, you know, I think the rubber might meet the road. So I like Dustin Poirier, and I think he's going to finish him.
Yeah, it's one of those, it could be one of those ones where we see the fighter, you know, he takes so much damage in one fight to which he took a lot of damage in that Fiziev fight. Let me tell you now. In the 3rd round, I thought he knocked him unconscious. I don't know if you remember for that second. You had a bet on it, so you probably do. Where Justin, his body kind of went limp for 1 second, and then he came back again. Oh, I think it was a left hook. Do you remember that?
Yeah, and some people were calling that a 10-8 round for Fiziev, which is, I mean, or excuse me, for Gaethje. Yeah, just, oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was insane. The judge, one of the judges scored it 10-8 round. When you were speaking about that fight, I was waiting for you to finish so I could shout out that judge because the 10-8 round for Fiziev in the 3rd round is one of the craziest singular scorecards for a round I have ever seen in my 10-year career, 7, 8, 9-year career watching MMA. That was crazy. But what I was going to say was it might be one of those cases where we see a fighter get beat up, but maybe they get the win or they last the decision. And then the next fight, they get knocked out by something that maybe by less punishment than the previous fight. We've seen it many times in UFC, right? Where like a fighter gets beat up badly. Alex Pereira beat up Bruno Silva very badly, but couldn't knock him out. And then he's getting knocked out by Gerald Meerschaert. And who was the other dude that dropped him? I can't remember who it was. Pretty sure someone else knocked him out, man. Bruno Silva or dropped him or something.
I can't remember off the top of my head, but he definitely had a little bit of that dry spell.
Yeah, the Blindado, man. He made, Brendan Allen, he was getting wobbled all over the place. Do you remember? He got dropped and stuff. So
yes,
he made it to a decision against Alex Pereira, got 7 shades of SHIT beaten out of him. Then he gets knocked out, basically dropped by Gerald Meerschaert. Then he gets knocked out basically and dropped by Brendan Allen, right? Who are not on the level of Alex Pereira. So it could be one of those ones. He went to war in his last fight. And I know Justin's known for going to war, but I wouldn't be surprised if he goes down from less punishment than he took in his last fight that he ended up winning. So, yeah, I definitely side with Poirier here. Just the fact that they're both very even, but Poirier's just 1-0 against him. And I just think he's the better fighter. I think he's the all-round better fighter is Dustin Poirier. I feel like Gaethje's... It's weird for me to say, but for Gaethje's skill set, I feel like he's overachieved. Whereas I think Dustin Poirier is achieving what he should do with his skill set. Obviously, they both have big holes in the grappling, but I just think Dustin Poirier is a level above at MMA in most aspects of the game. And I do think he has a little bit more dog and heart in him, which is crazy because Justin has a lot. I just feel like I think his durability is a bit better as well. I honestly do. I don't see Dustin getting as hurt as much as Gaethje, but it's tough, man. It's a close fight. I just definitely lean to the Dustin side. You know, a few people on Dustin here. Big Bird saying a CT came full circle. Justin learned how to throw a jab. Yeah, that last fight was interesting, man. Biggest question is Justin game plan. Nick saying, since it's for the BMF belt, they're both going to stand and bang. That's a weird thing, man. I don't know your thoughts on the BMF belt, but for me, it's just like, what the hell is this BMF belt? Are you being serious? Like, I thought they'd done that as like a Masvidal thing before, and now they're putting it on the line again, man. I mean, do you have any thought on the BMF belt? Like, for me, it's kind of cringy, man.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan, man. I didn't think it was great when it was the Nate and Jorge one, but I was like, one off, no problem there. Even if it became a lineal belt, that would have been okay to me. But the fact that it's just being resurrected after the guy retires feels really foolish, For an already gimmicky bullshit title, it feels way more gimmicky and like bullshit now. Think about the world's most violent man, which was like how they promoted it when it was Gaethje versus Alvarez. That was way more natural, organic, felt like a good selling point, right? But it wasn't forced. It was Eddie. Eddie said it in the moment. It sounded cool, right? This is all just like feathers and bullshit, right? It feels so unnatural, right?
And they literally did it, in my opinion, and it's pretty obvious. The reason they did it was so they could put it as a headliner on a pay-per-view, because now it has a title linked to it. Like the UFC has this weird thing about they have to have a title linked to the main event of a pay-per-view, but they couldn't do that. They didn't have a title this time out. None of the champions was able to fight. So then they've just put this dodgy BMF belt. Like, just let them fight, man. It's fine. Like, they don't need a belt, It's ridiculous, but it is what it is. This dude's saying, can you guys talk about Bobby Green versus Tony? So I guess we can talk about Bobby Green versus Tony. In my opinion, Tony's dead. Well, what I mean is Tony's past it, dramatically past it. What can I say about this fight, man? I don't have a massive opinion. I think Tony's done. I mean, he's old, he's washed. Tony was notoriously hard to finish, and it looked like he just gave the finish to Nate Diaz. I mean, you remember when Tony fought Beneil Dariush? And shout out to Beneil Dariush, because it was one of my biggest bets ever. I bet on him at -160. And he had his leg like twisted the other way. It was like a Mokaev type thing, right? And he didn't tap, right? He didn't tap. And then you think about that Charles Oliveira, his arm was basically broken and he still didn't tap. And then last time out, he tapped almost instantly from like a little guillotine. It's not even, he didn't even go out. I think it was a guillotine choke. Like, at least go out.
Dude, you're willing to insta-tapped, bro. He insta-tapped. And James, I'll tell you this. I am not a person that every time a fight doesn't go my way or something like that, I say fixed fight. My brother in Christ, that looked like the most fixed fucking Fugazi bullshit I've ever seen in my life. That's the God's honest truth. He taps at 209, James, to no resistance on a guillotine choke that he shot into from 5 feet away. I mean, just for the love of all things holy, I think my guy Nate might have just given him, the bag. Like, hey, bro, you already are slowing down. It's all good. I'll give you a nice check for the way out because I need to go up my stock to get this Jake Paul fight. That's what it looked like to me. And my brother, I bet Nate Diaz there. But even still, I didn't feel good cashing that one, bro. It just was a disgusting fight. Didn't feel like Tony. Didn't feel like Tony wanted to win. Afterwards, bro, he's up smiling, shaking his hand. I was like, that was uncomfortable and arguably not above board. So straight up, dude, it was one of the worst feelings I had cashing a bet ever. I cashed the Nate Diaz ticket and I still didn't feel good. I felt gross.
Yeah, so like, look, who knows, right? Who knows? At the end of the day, nobody knows if it was fixed. But if I had to lean whether Tony will come back having a real fight and look great again versus he just looks shit in that fight and he's going to look shit again, I'll lean to he's going to look shit again, you know. I think he's going to come in this fight and not look good. And, you know, whether it was fixed or not, like, I just can't get the image in my head out of my man having his arm basically broken but surviving, and then tap into a guillotine where you can just go unconscious.
If anyone can explain that to me under normal logic and circumstance, I'm all ears. But again, you have one guy try and rip your knee limb from limb. By the way, guys, a heel hook, everybody who's ever grappled for 1 second will tell you, if you're in a heel hook, you tap early and often to make sure you don't get injured, unless it's for millions of dollars, unless you're willing to put your knee on the line. He let his knee get torn apart. He let his arm get ripped to shreds. And yet he will tap instantly to a guillotine choke. I mean, Jesus Christ, be serious.
The only thing I'll say in terms of the logic, just to branch off your point or your question, is that at this point he's a lot older than the Beneil Dariush and the Charles Oliveira fight. At this point, he's kind of Beneil Dariush fight. He was still in the running for maybe coming up against the title. You know, like he was still gunning for the title. Charles Oliveira fight, he was still gunning for the title. Nate Diaz fight, he's never going to fight for the title again. He knows this. Morally, he's down. It was in the 4th round or something. He's tired at this point. He might have just wanted a way out. He hasn't got that fire in him anymore. He thought he could be the champion. He thought he was going to beat Khabib. And then he loses 2 on the bounce. He gets knocked 3 on the bounce, gets knocked out brutally by Michael Chandler, tapped out by, you know, Nate Diaz. Like, at that point, it's just like, fuck it, I can't be bothered. So, I don't know.
5 in a row, man. Brutal.
Yeah, 5 in a row is absolutely insane. So in this fight, I can't bring myself to pick anyone other than Bobby Green. I can't bring myself to bet on Tony, even though he's massive plus 250 underdog. I know a lot of people got Bobby Green at like minus 110, which is absolutely hilarious. So shout out to you guys who got that. I don't bet openers, but if I did, that would be one that I definitely would have bet, because I don't think that's a 50-50 fight. Look, he didn't look great, Bobby Green, in his last fight, but it was 1 round. He probably would have got into his rhythm after some time. Jared Gordon is a lot better than Tony Ferguson at this stage in terms of just his want to be there and his trickiness. And I don't know, man. I guess Bobby Green's going to win. Does he win inside the distance? I'm not so sure. Maybe. Like, it's hard to know because Tony Ferguson's one of the toughest guys in UFC history, right? But now he's been knocked unconscious and tapped out. As to whether you would never think Tony would get knocked unconscious a few years ago. You would never think they would get tapped out a few years ago. But now those things have become possible. So it's like, do you really want to bank on him being tough again? Because I know a lot of people were betting the over against Michael Chandler because it's like, yeah, Tony's washed, but he's still insanely tough. You can't finish him. And look what happened there. And then I know a lot of people would probably bet like not Nate Diaz by submission just because Tony's never been submitted. You can't submit Tony. He's elite, right? Maybe he can be knocked out like Chandler, but you can't submit him. And then he got submitted. So it's like, not only is he getting old, he's being beaten both ways. And it's just like, do you really want to just guess if he's still tough? If I had to bet, I'd say Bobby Green probably goes over, you know, like just because I don't think Bobby Green is a great finisher. And I do think Tony's still tough, but it's almost impossible to put your money down on an under and over just because of who Tony is at this stage. So in terms of bets, man, do you have big balls? Are you going to be betting on Tony Ferguson at like plus 300? Because let me tell you now, 4 or 5 years ago, this is a multi-max whale system play bet on Tony Ferguson at plus 275. But the father time doesn't wait for no man. So in terms of the totals over and under, and then also the money line, just give your quick thoughts on those.
Sure. I don't think that I'll be laying a money line in this fight. I don't think I'll be taking the underdog price on Tony Ferguson either. But Bobby Green at the minus 400 chalk, it's not something I want to do. He hasn't been in the best form lately. Honestly, kind of gave up in the Islam Makhachev fight. Just self-preservation there, live to fight another day. No skin off his back there, but just, not something I love to see for a minus 400 fighter. I'm going to be betting at 36 years of age. So those aren't enticing numbers to me, frankly. And in addition, the idea of the under, I don't really love. But I will just say this. I'm not going to be betting the over either. I think people would be a little bit foolhardy to do that because, number one, Bobby Green was tooling Drew Dober, he was tuning him up like an old guitar until he died in that fight. Like he was literally hitting him with every punch he wanted, walking him down, had a lot of confidence, and then got starched. So Bobby is still a guy who's capable of walking people down and beating them up with the boxing. And if Tony doesn't have the confidence here, and if he's not going to come out wrestling, I do think Bobby's going to apply a lot of pressure. But I don't really love this fight overall from a betting standpoint. It just feels too volatile, two old guys at lightweight. Again, shout out to my guy Pepe Sylvia, friend of the show, who got on it at -110 or -150 or whatever the hell it was. If you're on those Bobby Green numbers, if you beat the -200, you're laughing at this point. But at this number, do you really want to get cute? I don't.
Yeah. It's just a really tough fight to bet in terms of what the bookie has done to it, in my opinion. So look, that's it, man. Maybe we'll go now, guys. I don't know if there's any more fights you want to speak about, but we've been going for 1 hour 40, so I'm pretty sure we got a lot of content out there for the boys. Is there any other fight you want to speak about before we go, or shall we wrap it?
I think we're good to wrap it here. The last thing I'll just note is that the fight with Poirer and Blachowicz, it looks like the line is about to flip to pick 'em there. So if y'all wanted the plus money on Poirer, the train is about to leave the station. So I just wanted to let folks know that. I don't even have a bet on the fight yet, but just a line move that I've been tracking today. And he was like plus 120 last week around this time. And so it looks like it's going to flip to a pick 'em here during fight week. Just wanted to give people that heads up.
Just give me one word. Who wins? Poirer or Blachowicz?
Under. I think my gut lean is Poirer as the younger guy, but I want to look into the grappling a little bit more closely because I think Jan is a little bit of a fish off his back, which we saw against Glover. He hit him with the can opener, easy pass, but I do think on top he could be a hammer. So going to look into the wrestling grappling a little bit.
Yeah, the under is -180 at the moment on Bet Online for under 2.5 rounds. So it's not too bad, to be honest. I mean, usually I don't like to play lines like that juice, but I mean, clear finishing upside for both fighters. Although Jan doesn't hunt the finish too much on top, that would be the only thing that I would worry about, because either Jan's winning on the feet. Either Jan's competing on the feet, which he competed against Israel Adesanya, so I wouldn't say it's impossible for him to compete against Alex. If he's competing on the feet, then he could just compete for the 15 minutes and not get knocked out. But if he does take the fight to the ground, then he hasn't showed too much domination from top position. That would be my only worry about that. But I mean, light heavyweight, both fighters are huge. Alex moving up in weight. We know Alex can finish anybody. I would kind of be surprised for that to go over.
Have you seen Alex's only career loss? I think it was his first fight over in MMA prior to the Israel Adesanya fight I'm talking about, but the one where he gets submitted, it was more so like pace and the guy honestly landing shots on him. So that's the other thing is like, I don't know that you could submit him easily when sober, but I think if they're exchanging on the feet, that's a path. I also think that Alex showed in the Izzy fight, he's not opposed to wrestling. If he feels like he's got an opportunity, he might level change. The thing is, Jan Blachowicz has hit a couple of those devastating guillotine finishes, for example. So I think that Alex, against Izzy, he could get away with sloppy bullshit takedowns. You can't do that against Jan Blachowicz necessarily. So something else to watch for here.
Yeah. All right. Well, that'll be it, man. Liam, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. I get a lot of comments saying you two guys should do I think I sent you a couple of them. People always comment, you should do a podcast. Well, we've just done one for you right now. We haven't got anything official, but I'm sure anytime we will make it, we will. So yeah, thanks for coming on, bro. The floor is yours if you want to say anything to anybody watching out there.
Absolutely. Want to say appreciate you guys. Thanks for spending the time with us. Hope you guys had as much fun as we did because I had a blast. Always down to talk about these fights. Just want to let you guys know from a programming standpoint, tomorrow going to be going live around 11:30 p.m. Eastern time. Going to be talking about the first look on all the fights on the card, starting with that main event, working all the way down. Back for Bets and Banter on Thursday. That's at Liam Picks Fights on YouTube. Easiest way to find me. But you could also find me on podcasts, Liam Picks Fights. Search me everywhere, Instagram, Twitter, all that jazz, and you'll find me. So also, if you guys want to go one step deeper, I do have content on Patreon, extremely detailed fighter notes, some of them going back, 3-4 years in my archive. So thank you guys for the time. Once again, God bless you all. Hope you enjoy the fights. Let's get after it again soon.
Yeah, and with that being said, I will be doing a early look on every fight on the card as well. So I don't know whether I'm going to do that tomorrow or the day after, but I'm probably going to be doing that and moving forward because I've had a few people tell me that they want me to do that. So we'll see. But yeah, man, thanks everyone for being here in the chat. Everyone's saying thank you now, so I appreciate it. If you haven't already, hit the like button. It always helps the videos go out to a larger audience. GG's, yes is saying clap. AW saying clap. So yeah, thanks everyone for being here. 50 live viewers. We peaked at about 60 or something, and that's at about 4 a.m. in the morning. So thanks a lot, Liam, bro. I'll let you go. Good luck with your bets this weekend, and catch you on the other side.